So this is an episode that of a show that I have been thinking about for the past 10 years of my life. Alright, 10 years. The episode in question that made me think if I was actually living in real life or living in a fever dream. And yes, it was the episode of Big Time Rush called Big Time Cartoon. So in case you guys are new here, my name is Erin, but I know you guys aren't here for me. You're here to hear about this in this episode that's like, what is it? What is this episode? What is this episode? I'll explain it to you. So Big Time Rush is of course a show about four hockey players in Minnesota who get a job to work in Hollywood to be a band. And it was on Nickelodeon from about 2009 to like 2015-ish, kind of, something like that. And yeah, and it obviously canceled after 2015 after 4 seasons, like most Nick shows happen. And this episode, of course, was in season 4 because, like, they kind of run out of ideas after a while. And don't get me wrong, Big Time Rush was a really good show. I actually really enjoyed it when it was on, and I do think it still holds up now. I watched a few episodes. There's some episodes that are, like, weird, like this one, but there's some episodes that are genuinely genuine. Like season 1, season 2, season 3, they're all pretty good. Season 4 has a lot of good episodes too, but there's some episodes that are gonna make you, like, question your entire life. So, you tell me why there wasn't a random episode of season 4 that was a Big Time Rush and Fairly Odd Parents crossover. Like, they could have picked any show to have a crossover because kids, they live off of crossovers. I lived off of crossovers. Remember the Hannah Montana, Sweet Life on Deck, and Wizards of Waverly Place crossover event that happened on Disney Channel? I ate that up as a kid, okay? I ate it freaking up. And it would have been really cool to see, I don't know, maybe a Big Time Rush and How to Rock. Do you guys remember that show, How to Rock? A Big Time Rush, How to Rock crossover event? Or a Victorious and Big Time Rush crossover? Or iCarly, something like that. That would have been freaking cool, but they chose the Fairly Odd Parents, and it wasn't even a crossover. It wasn't even a crossover. They called it a crossover, but we'll get to it in a second. So the episode has 2 plots, like most episodes do. The first plot was how Big Time Rush, the band, was about to be making a cartoon about themselves because Gustavo Rock, their producer and songwriter, says so. And at first they wanted to do a video game, but then that has to do with a lot of sacrifices. Like, they had to cancel their concert, they had to, like, it was a lot of work, so they decided to just go with the more simple option, which was a cartoon, because for them, all they had to do was just lend their voices, and the animators do the rest. But then, as someone was pitching the idea for the cartoon, that man himself was, of course, Butch Hartman, the creator of the Fairly Odd Parents.
Allow me to introduce to you the creative genius behind the Fairly Odd Parents, and hopefully, your big-time cartoon, Mr. Butch Hartman. Hi, I'm Butch Hartman.
He also, like, introduces himself as the mastermind behind the Fairly Odd Parents, just so you know. Oh, and side note, in case you guys are randomly curious about this, for any of you Family Guy watchers out there, yes, the doctor, Dr. Hartman, is actually named after Butch Hartman, because, you know, he's friends with a few Family Guy members, in case you're curious. So, as I mentioned before, he guest stars in this episode as the, like, producer and writer and animator of the show that he's trying to pitch to Big Time Rush. And I'm not gonna lie, just for some reason, I genuinely thought that Butch Hartman wrote this episode for the longest time. It was really dumb of me to not, like, look it up to be sure. But as a kid, I genuinely thought that he wrote Big Time Rush. Like, I thought that Butch Hartman was a writer of Big Time Rush, like the entire show. But no, I looked it up, and apparently he did not write it. Scott Fellows wrote it, who pretty much writes, like, every episode of Big Time Rush. But I thought that something was up with Butch Hartman. Like, I thought they made a deal of some sorts. Like, I thought this episode was, like, sponsored by, like, Fairly Odd Parents. Even though Fairly Odd Parents is Nickelodeon, it's all confusing. So at this point in Nickelodeon, Fairly Odd Parents was kind of coming to an end, the same time as Big Time Rush was kind of coming to an end. This was when Fairly Odd Parents was in their 9th season, and as we all know, the show ended after its 10th season. And of course, this is the last season of Big Time Rush, and this is when Nickelodeon knew, because Nickelodeon has a 4-season contract, so most shows reach at least 4 seasons. If it's really bad, then less seasons, and if it's really good, more seasons. Like iCarly. iCarly made it to 6 seasons, but Big Time Rush was like decent, so they only made it to their 4-season contract. So like I mentioned before, I genuinely thought that Butch Hartman was a writer of Big Time Rush, like the entire show, and mainly this episode, of course, because of just how cartoony Big Time Rush is. Like, if you guys watch Big Time Rush, you guys know what I'm talking about. Like, there's this composer named Guy Moon. He works on, like, every episode of Fairly Odd Parents. He's the one who makes every single music, every sound effect. Like, if you guys watch the show now, like Fairly Odd Parents, if you guys watch it and know that, you guys are never gonna unhear it. Every single motion that a person makes, a character makes, there is sound for. Like, there is everything. A character blinks, a character turns, a character walks, like, everything. Everything has sound effects to it. And that is the same exact thing for Big Time Rush. Like, the same exact thing. Like, literally a character walks, falls, talks, whatever. There is gonna be sound for it. It's kind of crazy when you actually think about it. But apparently, I guess I was wrong on all accounts, because he does not work for the show either. So, it's just a Nickelodeon thing, I guess. I don't know. Because as we all know, that Dan Schneider is kind of the person who, like, ruled Nick shows for the longest time. He wrote, like, all the shows, Victorious, Drake and Josh, iCarly, like, you name it. He wrote all those shows. But there was a few shows that he wasn't a part of, which was, of course, Fairly Odd Parents and Big Time Rush, and probably a few other shows. But they all have their own kind of, like, shtick that they have. This is their own little thing that they have with, like, the obsessive music, the cartooniness to it. I don't know. So Butch Hartman, who is playing himself in this episode, he pitches the idea of Big Time Rush being stranded on an island, and then Carlos finding some, like, magical shoes or something that gives them the power of dance foo.
Magical shoes that you guys found in a cave that give you the magical power of dance foo.
Cool. Check that out.
Yeah. They also showed, like, a supposed theme song if the cartoon was real, and I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of fire.
There was a man named Big Time who discovered magical shoes, and when they put them on, they got into a super crowd riding groove. Big Time Rush, hey, magical shoes, yo!
Like, it was good for, like, it's very Butch Hartman-esque. I don't know. I thought it was good, but then for some reason, like, they did not think it was good. I mean, they're used to Gustavo Rock writing all of their songs, so who knows. So they did act like they liked the cartoon when Butch Hartman was in the room, to not seem rude, but once he left, they, of course, admitted that they did not like it, and they decided to do the video game instead, even though they thought it was too much work, but it's better than the cartoon. Ouch.
So we do the video game. Yep.
So now we get to the really weird subplot. Like, what? So we see Katie, who is Kendall's younger sister, watching Fairly Odd Parents in her apartment. And she's watching an episode of season 9 called I Dream of Cosmo, which is important. Like, the episode that she is watching is important to this subplot. And what's really trippy about this whole scene? Okay, so I remember watching this episode of Fairly Odd Parents when it came out, because yes, this is a real episode that they were showing in this episode of Big Time Rush. It's confusing, but I distinctly remember watching this episode when it first aired. Yes, I watched Fairly Odd Parents up until, like, the Chloe season, so the 10th season when I stopped watching it, but I watched the Sparky season here and there, and I do distinctly remember watching this episode. And yeah, this episode first aired in, like, 2015, I believe. So for Big Time Rush, this is, like, a new episode of Fairly Odd Parents, so most kids probably haven't seen this episode yet. And so this episode of Fairly Odd Parents is one of those really basic, like, cartoony ideas where Cosmo knocks his head or something, and then of course he gets amnesia and he forgets who he is, But then Timmy's dad kind of like gaslights Cosmo into believing that he's a genie. This is season 9. So basically the whole episode, Wanda, Timmy, and Poof are trying to like, knock Cosmo back on the head again to hopefully get his memory back. Cartoon logic. But in the actual episode of Fairly Odd Parents, like not the Big Time Rush part, in the actual episode of Fairly Odd Parents, Cosmo eventually does remember that he's a fairy towards the end, but then he forgets his name because he's Cosmo and he's an idiot. So he states that his name is Couscous. I'm not making this up. Or something along those lines. But when Katie was watching this episode in her apartment, we see Buddha Bob behind her, who is the Palmwoods maintenance man. He's on a ladder fixing a light bulb. He's watching the episode as well while he's fixing the light bulb. And right on the screen, we get to the part where he gets his memory back. And he says, and I quote,
"Wait a minute, it's all coming back to me. I'm not a weenie. I'm a fairy, and my name is Cosmo."
Which is what he says in the Big Time Rush version. But that's not what he says in the actual episode. In the actual episode, he says, I'm a fairy, and my name is Couscous. And the funniest part about this, I know they did this because we had to hear him say his name was Cosmo, and this was the only episode where they could do it, but then they dubbed over him saying Couscous, and obviously dubbed him saying Cosmo, which is obviously not what he actually said in the episode, so it sounded so weird because it was just such a bad dub. Like, it did not sound right, like you knew something was wrong, like, it was really weird, it was really trippy. I felt like I was gaslit when I first watched this episode. I was like, what? This is not the episode. And again, they probably did this too because like it wouldn't make sense if you said anything else for the people who haven't watched the episode of Fairly Odd Parents yet. And it also had to have said his name Cosmo because of what happens later in the episode. So back to the actual Big Time Rush episode. So Buddha Bob falls off the ladder, and then he suddenly forgets who he is. So as you can tell, the Fairly Odd Parents episode and the Big Time Rush episode is connecting. So Buddha Bob now thinks that he is Cosmo from the Fairly Odd Parents. And he even talks like him.
Are you okay?
Of course I'm okay. I'm Cosmo.
Oh no.
And yes, the actor who plays Buddha Bob is also the voice of Cosmo in real life, the OG voice. I mean, there's only been one actor who played Cosmo, but like, yeah, he's him.
And I've got underarm hair. I'm definitely not shaving that. Don't worry, Wanda. You'll always have me.
Which I feel like is the only reason why they kind of made this storyline, because it'd be kind of weird if it was anyone else. Also, if you guys aren't active watchers of Big Time Rush, Tara Strong is also in Big Time Rush. She plays the Hollywood Arts, the Palmwoods teacher. And yeah, she's the voice of Timmy Turner, so I generally never put two and two together. Like, I knew that Tara Strong was in Big Time Rush, and I knew that Darren Norris, I'm sorry I forgot his name, the voice of Cosmo, is also in the show, but I never put two and two together that they were in the same show. Another reason why I thought that Butch Hartman was a creator of Big Time Rush, because some of the actors were in this show. Especially because the voice of Cosmo is also the voice of so many characters. He's the voice of so many characters in the Fairly Odd Parents. He's the voice of Jorgen, Timmy's dad, like, that's many more. That's all I can think of off the top of my head, but he voices many more. And another side note, I don't know in this episode if Buddha Bob is like mouthing the words are coming out of his mouth, because yes, I know that it's like actually his voice, and I know that he is the voice of Cosmo, but just like the way he's mouthing it, I don't know if it's like he's like kind of like mouthing his own dialogue to make the sound come better, or if he's actually talking in his Cosmo voice live, because something about the way that it's filmed makes it seem like he's like lip talking, but I don't know. I don't know. If you guys are curious about the freaking Big Time Rush storyline, it's not important. It's really not. Like, this whole episode is kind of filler, to be honest, but their storyline in general is filler. It is. It's bad. Basically, in case you guys are curious, Big Time Rush had to dress up as like in green suits because they were trying to do the video game thing, but then they got locked out of Rock Records, So they're like running around, and people for some reason think that they're aliens, and so they get captured by the CIA, and police are following them, and paparazzi. It's a whole thing.
Paparazzi.
But of course, their storyline doesn't really like connect until, I mean, it doesn't really connect at all, but it doesn't really get important again until the end of the episode. So like, I'll get back to the freaking Cosmo storyline. So Buddha Bob then runs off, and he's now dressed like Cosmo, which is basically just a white shirt and a tie. So like, nothing too outlandish. So Katie and Mrs. Knight decide to just like kind of let him deal with this and kind of just play along until suddenly he realizes that he's not Cosmo.
We'll just play along, and then he'll realize he's not really a magic fairy, and remember, he's a janitor.
So Cosmo, so Buddha Bob offers to grant her a wish, and he does, or she does ask for a wish. She does, ask for a wish, and then he pretends to grant it, and then Katie's like, see, he's not an actual fairy. But then, of course, the wish ends up coming true.
What is your wish? I wish you'd get rid of the obnoxious tuba player in the apartment above us.
Goodbye, Palm Woods.
So then Mrs. Knight does not want him to become better, because she thinks that all of a sudden he's like magic now because he forgot who he is.
Wait! He grants wishes.
But of course, Katie, actually having a brain, does not believe this. So as the day goes on, they literally watch him like he's a freaking child. And apparently he grants much more wishes, and the wishes actually end up becoming true. But Katie just thinks that they're all coincidences. Then Buddha Bob disappears, and they find him on the roof. Yeah, he's about to jump off because he believes that he could fly. Then Mrs. Knight finally realizes this is a bad idea, and then she, asks Katie to finally call the doctor. Thank you.
Okay, you can call Doc Hollywood.
And thank God she did not hesitate. Because there's so many cartoon moms or so many kid show moms that are just so dumb. And I'm so glad that, Kendall and Katie's mom is not like that. Like, bro was about to jump. So the doctor arrives, and then they finally come to realize the truth about cartoon logic.
Any other cartoon head injury, the cure can be complicated.
Are you serious?
Says you gotta just whack them on the back of the head with a frying pan. Just like they always do in cartoons.
Alone at last.
So he does it, and then boom, he's back. And somehow all the wishes become undone. So Butch Hartman finally appears again at the end of the episode, because they realize that they once again do not want to do the video game, they rather do the cartoon. So the last 10 minutes of the episode just consists of the cartoon that they created, and it ends with a very catchy song of theirs at the end. So do you guys remember those learning robots? Like those learning robots that the teacher would show you during school called Brain Pop? It's like this little orange robot with this random guy, and they just talk about science or something. Yeah, the animation gives off those vibes.
Why couldn't we take a tour submarine instead? Because Carlos is afraid of water. Did somebody say water?
So as I mentioned before, this episode was legit a fever dream. It was a fever dream. It's still a fever dream. I had to literally go back and make sure I didn't make this up, because it looks like something I would have made up in my head. I thought this would be kind of an appropriate video to make, since my latest video that I made on this channel is my most viewed commentary / analysis video that I've made. So thank you guys so much for watching that. It was of course about Fairly Odd Parents, so I might as well make another one, because I only made 2 Fairly Odd Parents videos just because of the new show that just came out. I did that with the 9 Realms when the 9 Realms first came out, which is of course a How to Train Your Dragon reboot. So I'm like, me and reboots. Let me, because I heard the Big Time Rush is having a reboot. So I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it, okay? So my most viewed video ever was a very lazy compilation that I made about like 3 years ago about Brian and Stewie from Family Guy. And it really never got that much views in like so long, but all of a sudden in the last like a few months, the views like skyrocketed on that video. I really don't know why. Like I've been getting notifications. I've been like going like it just blew up all of a sudden. At the time I'm filming this, I have about 174,000 views on that video. So thank you guys so much for watching that. So who knows? Maybe in the future I might make a Family Guy video again. You know, an analysis video of something around that sort. I was thinking about making something similar to that, but I guess you guys would just have to see. So thank you guys for watching this video. I know it's really random, but I generally just had to talk about this episode because I haven't talked about it since I first saw it. And I want to make sure that I'm not going crazy. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!